Kamala Todd was born and raised in the Coast Salish territory of Vancouver, BC. She's a community planner, a filmmaker, and a writer concerned with making space for Aboriginal stories and perspectives in our cities. To help us indigenize our urban eyes, Kamala Todd.
Tansei. Thank you. So I'd like to get you guys to think about what is your urban view? This is my urban view, and growing up in the city of Vancouver. What are the stories? What is the language of our urban habitats? How much do we know of the places that we walk on? How much do we know of the cities? When I was growing up in Vancouver, I was surrounded by the stories of the dominant culture, the colonial culture. Like this plaque here that's in the downtown area that talks about how the first land commissioner, Hamilton, commenced to measure the streets of Vancouver onto an empty land. And so that is very much the kind of narrative that I've been surrounded by growing up in the city of Vancouver. So this is our iconic postcard image of the beautiful city that I was blessed to be born in and my children were born in. We're known as the City of Glass, the Dream City, world's most livable city, all of these really wonderful accolades that are well-deserved. It's a beautiful place. But what is reflected of the Coast Salish people? This is a place of the Hunkaminam-speaking people, the Musqueam people, the Tsleil-Waututh people, and other nations who have a history that stretches back thousands of years. So I'm looking at this place, Southeast False Creek, when we're talking about remaking spaces. This is a new neighborhood that's been created. And here, for me, was a perfect opportunity for the city of Vancouver to celebrate, incorporate, work with, and weave in the Indigenous narratives of this new place that they want to make a sustainable village. But instead, the history that was commemorated and kind of referenced in the public art and so on was the industrial history, a very recent history. And so in spite of all this beautiful replanting and sort of making things sustainable, which is wonderful, we've missed this opportunity to kind of deepen the roots of where we live and deepen our understanding. And to hear from the Coast Salish people themselves. Like, what is the history of this place to them? What I've heard is it had lots of streams, it has a huge importance as a village site, and yet those things are absent and missing. There's a little bit of public art. There's a Coast Salish art piece that you have to kind of go through the bushes in order to see, in order to read the plaque, to even know that it represents Coast Salish art. And so it's not enough to try to really embed this sense of indigeneity, the sense that everywhere you walk in Vancouver, it is Coast Salish territory. Cole Harbour near Stanley Park is another example of this remade landscape. It's a new area, new neighborhood. And it's a perfect example of Vancouverism, what we've come to be known for. Cities around the world are now Vancouverizing. And what that is this idea of high-density downtowns, lots of residential development, lots of mixed use, lots of public amenities and park space and so on. All wonderful, as you know, many of you are looking at how to revitalize your downtowns. But again, as people are coming here, because this is the entryway into Vancouver for many people. This is where the cruise ships come in. This is where Stanley Park is. Are they welcomed into an Indigenous place? Are they welcomed into Coast Salish culture? No. Instead, we have this kind of generic urbanity. And, you know, what could it look like? How could we transform our built environment? How could we transform the ways that we shape our built environment to be less generic, to be less empty, and to be more reflective of Indigenous people? And to start seeing that as an asset. And, you know, I think there's a history of sort of fearing or denying the Indigenous roots of where we live, and maybe just not knowing how to connect to that. We have the Trade and Convention Center, which is a beautiful new building, lots of people there, lots of activity happening, lots of replanting of native plants, which is great to see. But from my experience in that space, there was nothing to reference, you know, the connection of local people to those plants and the knowledge of those plants and how that can help us live more sustainably. I wasn't sure if these beams were supposed to reference longhouses or if it was some kind of reference, because there really wasn't any signage or anything that I could find. So, but you know, there's ways of incorporating elements and beginning to start that relationship and get past this kind of city of glass that really doesn't reflect the depth, that we have in Vancouver. That's something really that I think we can celebrate and connect to. Really the narratives that's still there, as I was reading all of the displays and the signage that's there, is still that narrative of the pioneer culture and, you know, the brave men who cut down all the trees and carved a wilderness. You know, this image of Vancouver as being very new and very young. I think Edmonton probably has that narrative as well. It really kind of forgets the depth of history that's there, that we're all connected to. So to me, Coast Salish culture, it's the weavings, it's the blankets, it's the cedar, it's all of the things that I've been taught, the stories that I've been taught from people who have shared those stories with me. And yet they're not visible, and how can they be visible? And how can that change the way development happens? So that, for example, this was this year where a development company was going to build condos, and they started to dig on a village site in a burial ground of the Musqueam community. And so they had to go there and fight and set up camp, and you know, they had been trying to stop that from happening for years, but the province still gave a permit for that company to go and start digging. And so they were digging up ancestors, and Musqueam begged them to stop, and they had to basically literally write themselves back onto the land to try to remind people that they belong to that place, that they have a history there that stretches back thousands of years. And how amazing is that Vancouver has that history. And so the village of Cessnam, they finally were able to purchase that piece of land. They had to buy back their land in order to save it from being dug up. So you can see how they had to try to write themselves onto the road, and they graffitied the road and try to remind people that this is a sacred place. And even though you're in a city, it's still an Indigenous city. And I want to get us thinking that way, because every Canadian city is an Indigenous city. And it's not about displacing people, it's just about reconnecting and remembering the land that we stand on. Hi, hi.